Hi, everyone. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Both Charter and Comcast lost over 100,000 subscribers in the second quarter of this year. Why might that be? We'll take a look at the numbers in just a moment. Hi there. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. I'm Rick Usey with Zcorum, and these two reports came out very quickly together here. First Comcast, then Charter. So I'm going to read here from the report about Charter. So you see here, Charter, this is in Next TV. Charter follows suit with Comcast with worst ever broadband quarter losses, 149,000 subscribers in second quarter. It was also the worst quarter for Comcast. The good news, amid a toxic stew of ACP defunding and fiber and fixed wireless competition, the loss was only around half of what analysts feared. So analysts were expecting it to be a lot worse. I think the ACP was one reason they were expecting it to be worse, but I never really thought that would have as big an impact, I think, as people were saying. So it's not quite as bad, but it was not good, obviously, if you are Comcast or Charter. So Charter Communications followed Comcast's landmark bad second quarter broadband growth with a worst quarter ever of its own, reporting the loss of 149,000 subscribers, residential high-speed and internet customers in the second quarter. And Comcast, I don't know if it listed in here or not, they lost 120,000, so they were not too far behind there. And to compare that, I think that's about 100,000 more than Comcast lost the same time this same time last year, I should say. With the defunding of the ACP over the spring, along with increased competition from fiber and fixed wireless access, cable broadband is being affected by a range of issues. That's true. And I think the fixed wireless has a big play in that. And I'm going to take a look at some charts here and we'll see how things match up. But we'll also see that the pandemic played a big role in the big increase in subscribers over time for cable operators. And frankly, I think as the pandemic kind of wound down, we saw the opposite happening. So you see here in the words of analyst Craig Moffett, it's not easy right now to discern what's really going on in cable broadband. Today, Charter reported a loss of just 149,000 broadband subscribers. Yes, as was the case with Comcast, that's the worst quarter ever for broadband. But the loss was roughly half of what it had been feared by consensus. So yippee, huh? Moffett added. So in other words, wow, that sounds like good news, but I don't know. I'll take a look at this chart here in a minute. That's pretty much the end of this article. But investors are just as flummoxed as equity analysts after a week in which Charter stock swung wildly based on the earnings reports of other cable and wireless companies. Charter stock was up over 16% as of this sentence typing. And, it's not going to be, they're not going to see a big drop. I mean, if analysts were expecting it to be much worse, then their stock's going to do fine and it could go up here because analysts were expecting it to be a lot worse than it was. So that's good news, actually. Even though it looks like bad news, it's good news. So you look at the chart here. So you can see the first thing you can tell from this chart is that this is nothing new. So you see here right around, let's say between 2020 and 2021, last quarter, first quarter, you start to see things level off and dip. So what was going on here? Well, this is the beginning of the pandemic. So here you've got first quarter of 2020. So you can see growth was kind of trending down, then it got flat. And these are net additions. So, kind of trending flat. And then we hit the pandemic. And right here, you see the big spike. So this is when suddenly a lot of folks found themselves at home. They realized they didn't have a good internet connection to be able to do things like Zoom calls for work and the kids doing Zoom classes. So lots of folks connected back up here. They realized that their mobile connection wasn't enough at home. They were using their broadband at work for various things. And at home, a lot of folks were using their phone. Or maybe the other thing is they might have had a inferior kind of technology like DSL, and this gave them, maybe if there was a cable operator in the area, they would upgrade or go with a cable operator from something they had before. So this was the pandemic right here. And then right around here, we got between the end of 2020, the end of 2021, this is right as the pandemic, the vaccines came out right about here, right at the first of 2021. So we started to see that. So people started to get back to work, and they were, at that point, maybe going back to work, and some of them were saying, you know what, okay, things are back to normal now, kind of, so I don't necessarily need, maybe the kids are back in school, I'm back at work, depending what state you're in. Took a little longer in some states than others, but they could start dropping some of those. So I think you're seeing some of that here. And as you can see, it's been a fairly steady decline over time. So you can't blame the ACP, lack of ACP, because ACP didn't even start here. The ACP started right about here, first quarter of 2022. So, we had a little leveling off here. This, I suppose, could be some ACP stuff going on here as people signed up. But you had a continued decline here, continued. You see some fairly substantial drops. A little leveling off here around 2023, second, third, fourth quarter. And the ACP, they were pushing pretty hard here on that. So that might have account for some of those gains right there. But then again, a fairly consistent decline over all this time. So this number right here, if you're looking at trends, should not be unexpected. So I'm not seeing anything that would make me think the ACP was really too much involved in this. So what else is it? Well, let's take a look at another chart here, kind of along this time. So again, here we're looking at when things start to ramp up for cable operators. Again, this is the pandemic. And then right about here, things start to ramp down. And again, this is when, as I mentioned, the pandemic starts to wind down. But what else was happening at that time? Let's take a look at T-Mobile growth over that time. We'll look over here on the right. This is their net adds, but this is just the number of subscribers that they had. So here you're looking at that same time frame, fourth quarter 2020, first quarter 2021. They're just getting started on this. So you got 100,000 or so subscribers. Next quarter you got 200,000. Next quarter you got just under 300,000, then you've got over 400,000. So right here, we're looking at 2021 and going into 2022, and you can see a pretty sharp uptick right here. You can see the same thing here in the net adds around that time. You've got, again, going from Q1 2021 to 2022, big increase, and then it's fairly consistent and flat there, and then starting to trail off on 2024. Right there. So this, I think, accounts for, again, same time frame of a lot of what's going on here. So you've got people some of these folks, I think, were leaving, but they were going back to work and maybe dropping their subscription, or they were going back to work and maybe trying something else that might be less expensive, where they didn't have to have a long term commitment. They could just go ahead and sign up for T-Mobile. A lot of that was T-Mobile at that point, but Verizon jumped in later around this time. Verizon's coming in with more of their kind of nationwide 5G. So I think that's what we're seeing there. That's one big factor. What else is going on? This is the inflation rate. So again, let's look at this. Let's look at these dates. So here you've got 2020, 2021. The inflation rate, back in 2020, it was well below 1%. It was 0.3%. Up around the end of 2020. And again, this is upticking from the pandemic. Then we get to 2021, and really at this point, as I mentioned, if you look at this point here, we were seeing it. Yeah, it's Q1 2020, Q2 2021. That's why Q1 2021. Okay, so let's go back to here. So here we're looking at first quarter 2021. So we see right here, big uptick, going up to 2.6%, 4.2%, 5%, levels off a little bit into October 2021, takes another big spike. So here we're seeing it spiked up to 8.5% and eventually 9.1% right here and around, looks like around August of 2022. So prices are going up. So as people, broadband prices might have been trying to, remain consistent here, but price of gas, price of food, everything, maybe home costs, those kinds of things. Everything's going up here. So you're up to a rate of 9.1% in August 2022. Things start to reduce there as far as the rate of inflation. So you see here by the end of 2023, that's as far as this chart goes out, we're down to, that's 5%, somewhere in here. What is that? That's 6%. So 5% is right about here. And I think today it's somewhere, if I remember looking recently, I think it was somewhere over 2%. I think it might have been 2.5%, something like that. So it's dropped down to here. But that's still, higher than it was. And then most importantly, people talk about the inflation rate. Well, this, once we get down to here, it doesn't mean that we're back where we were here, because all of this happened. So it's not like, these were increases in prices. This is the rate of inflation. So prices were increasing, and they're just increasing less at this point. So things are still way more expensive than they were back here. Even if we get back down to a point, let's say a 1.3% inflation rate, usually you try to get around 2%. So even if we get down to a 2% or a little bit under that, prices are still going to be way higher because you had this huge increase in prices here. Some things will moderate and maybe come back down a little bit closer on pricing where they were, depending on the price of oil, those kinds of things. But and that has a big, price of gas, oil has a significant impact on other stuff because of everything else that relies on gasoline, including shipping products, all the manufacturing, people driving to work, everything is impacted, by the price of gas. It's a big factor. But as I say, even if we get back down to here, prices are still high. So again, if we look at here we're looking at the peak point was August 2022. Certainly it was going up between the end of 2021 and let's say the summer of 2022. So again, if we look back to here is the end of 2021 and then 2022. So this inflation here, I think we've got, let's see, when did it start declining? So we've got first quarter 2021, and again, that is when the inflation rate started kicking up. First quarter 2021 took a big jump here, continued on, and again started to moderate here. But again, it doesn't mean that the prices have gone down. It just means that they're rising less quickly, not rising as much right there. And then finally, I want to take a look at the ACP numbers. So once again, the ACP didn't start until right about here. So we don't see, if we're thinking the ACP is going to be related to these most recent numbers, we didn't see much of an impact, again, unless there was something right here from the ACP. So the ACP numbers, you see, were pretty consistent, starting back on the first quarter of 2022, started under 10 million. A lot of this would have been transfer over from the emergency broadband benefit. So that was a pandemic program that provided broadband to folks not based on their income, but based on whether they had been thrown out of work. So then the Affordable Connectivity Program came out with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that sucked in the money from the emergency broadband benefit, and those people that were on it could apply for the ACP. But again, there was a different parameter there. It was whether you were one of several different factors that would consider that you were low income and needed that benefit. And there's a lot of them. And one of the problems we had with the program is that I mentioned this yesterday, 4 out of 10 households could apply for the ACP, which makes it very difficult because that's going to make the money just go that much faster. So you can see this was fairly consistent here, increase starting out. Again, I believe with the emergency broadband benefit was why it started out here, increasing on up. So under 10 million, all the way up to the 23 or so million that were in the program when it was winding down. So, and it could have gone a lot higher than this. I think this trend line would have continued if the program had been available longer. Plus, they were planning on expanding the number of groups. Instead of just tribal communities that could get $75 instead of $30 per month, they were going to expand that to rural areas, that people that were in certain rural areas that could get that same higher benefit. So the cost of that program was really expanding, would be really hard to maintain. The other thing that you had in that program was that someone could, not only the fact that a lot of households could qualify for it, including those that could actually afford broadband. So I think a lot of the people that were signing up for the Affordable Connectivity Program already had broadband service, and they were getting a subsidy to help pay for that. And because they could afford it, they could maybe afford to get a higher cost package. So they were getting a $30 subsidy, let's say, but said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get a gig, which is $80, and I'll get a $30 subsidy, and it won't cost me as much. So we were actually allowing people to use that subsidy and get a higher cost plan, which means they could afford broadband, but yet we were letting them apply that $30 subsidy toward it. So that's the other thing there, is that I think it's pretty clear that the ACP didn't seem to be impacting this. I think one reason is because a lot of people already had a broadband account and they were getting the ACP, which was helping them either afford their broadband, which was good, especially with the inflation rate going up, but then also maybe upgrading their broadband so they could actually afford it maybe, and were getting the subsidy. So I don't see a big impact from ACP. And these are just Charter's numbers, so we don't know what, I think these are Charter's numbers if I remember, looking in here, company reports. Yeah, Charter Broadband net adds. So Comcast may look very similar to this. I wouldn't be surprised if it does, as would maybe a lot of other operators. So there you see that, again, a lot of factors, but I think probably one of the biggest factors would be T-Mobile coming in at exactly the same time. And these cable operators would be pretty good for the picking here because a lot of them, again, have their long-term commitments that you have to sign up for if you want to get their lowest price. So you sign up for that, and then as that cost goes way up when your term is over, then you have to call and ask them, hey, can you give me the deal again? I don't want to pay that much. Or suddenly you realize, wow, T-Mobile's out there. Let me see what they have to offer. And then you realize, wow, I can sign up for that. They send me a little box. I put it in my home. It's easy to set up, and then I pay for it per month. So I think some people maybe switch to T-Mobile. And then the other factor, again, is just people right here maybe going back to work. And the inflation rate kind of happening at the same time may have pushed some people into that as well, because these could be people that were, again, maybe people that didn't have fixed wireline broadband at the time, but they got it because of the pandemic. And then with the inflation rate coming on, it would be another reason for them to go ahead and drop that again. If they're back at work, but their prices for groceries and gas and everything else is going up, they're like, you know what, I don't need a fixed wired broadband connection anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and drop that. Or I'm going to switch to something that's a little more expensive that I can do month to month, like a T-Mobile or Verizon if they were around at that point. I think Verizon was kicking in right around here. And that way they can reduce their bill or maybe eliminate that bill. Because again, there's other folks, as people are younger and younger that are out there living in their own apartments and homes or whatever, they tend to be cord-neverers. So a lot of them have just been operating on mobile at home, and that's what they're used to. So it's like, okay, I don't need that. They see that bill, they don't need it anymore, and they start dropping that. So I think that's some of what we're seeing as well here, is maybe the combination of the inflation rate going up at the same time that the pandemic's winding down, and at the same time that you've got competitive options that might be less expensive and month to month versus having to sign up for a long-term commitment. So I think that's what's happening to the cable industry. Again, as the analysts say here, it's hard to know for sure. But the one thing I can tell you as I look at this is I don't see a big ACP impact, because I don't see a big ACP impact when the trend line was going up for the ACP. And I don't see a real difference as the trend line goes down as the ACP wound down. I'm not seeing that having a big impact. I think those people that a lot of people had broadband already, so we didn't see the big trend line up, and we're not seeing the same decline in that as well. So I think a lot of people who have it are keeping it, that might still have had the ACP, that they're not necessarily dropping their internet connection because of that, I guess is what I'm saying. So anyway, just my thoughts. Could be right, could be wrong. Again, there's lots of factors that could be playing in there, but you never know. So again, I expect other operators are seeing the same kinds of things, and T-Mobile has been growing. They have been T-Mobile and Verizon, generally fixed wireless, have been the only broadband operators that have actually seen growth in the last year to 2 years. It's been pretty much flat to downhill for other operators. That includes fiber operators, because the fiber operators, they are, in addition, they're doing well. Obviously, they're growing where they have fiber, but they are also, in a lot of those areas, they are replacing their DSL infrastructure, their copper infrastructure, with fiber. So while they may be adding fiber customers, they're also losing DSL customers, so that it's a wash, or it's maybe even a net loss, as you've got maybe, again, some other competition coming in there for them. So that's what fiber operators have been dealing with. So we're going to see increases again, and we're especially going to see increases for fiber operators, that's existing fiber operators, as they get more and more of their territories over to fiber and start looking to new customers. And we're going to see new fiber providers come in various areas. We're going to see cable operators that are going to be expanding with fiber, or maybe overbuilding some of their areas. So I think we'll see some growth in the fixed broadband area. It won't be like it was back prior to the pandemic, but I think we'll start to see things look pretty good for those companies. And a lot of that has to do with funding, the BEAD funding that's going to be coming out. But it also has to do with the fact that T-Mobile and others, as we saw from that chart, they kind of are leveling off a little bit on their growth. And I think that a lot of that has to do with, one, somewhat saturation as people, as they had a big uptick of potential subscribers there, but also they've got limited spectrum. So some of them in areas, including my area here, they don't take customers. I'm here in a area that's got pretty good amount of competition as far, I've got fiber here with AT&T. I've got Comcast Xfinity. And for a while, T-Mobile was selling their fixed wireless product at my address, but they weren't the last time I looked, and that's because they've just got limited spectrum, and mobile broadband is their bread and butter, and they don't want to threaten that by having too many resources going or too much spectrum going towards the fixed wireless customers, and they're going to be seeing that in other areas as they increase the number of subscribers. They're eventually going to level off there. So that is good news, I guess, for the cable operators and fiber operators that have been competing with them. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to our channel, if you would please just take a moment to click that subscribe button. Make sure the bell is rung there to be notified when I'm live. And if you like this, if you'd give me a thumbs up, I would appreciate that. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.